This CACFP Meal Pattern webinar on meal pattern crediting was presented on January 29, 2020 to a center sponsor audience. The version you are currently viewing has been edited and shortened from the original.
Hello, everyone. This is Shirley Wu, and we are going to get started. Welcome to the Meal Pattern Success webinar on the Child and Adult Care Food Program Meal Pattern Crediting. Again, my name is Shirley Wu. I am a child nutrition specialist with the Oregon Department of Education, and I will be presenting the webinar today. Today's webinar will be focused on updates to the CACFP meal pattern within the last year. This training was made possible by a meal pattern grant from the USDA. I'm going to go over what ODE-CMP hopes you will learn from our session, and then go through a quick review of some CACFP meal pattern basics. Then we will go through the main section of our training, which is on crediting updates. And then I will go over some additional meal pattern updates that were sent out recently, and finally go through any questions that might have come in through those chat boxes or question panel. Here are the two learning objectives for our session. First, after this training, participants will understand which new food items are creditable for CACFP. And second, that even if you don't remember everything from this 1-hour session, you will know where to find information on crediting foods for CACFP. First, as a reminder for those long timers on the program, it's probably a good time to take a minute and think about the changes in the last few years in CACFP. We have had a major meal pattern overhaul in 2017, and some of these changes included adding a whole grain rich requirement, making grain-based desserts non-creditable, adding a sugar limit to breakfast cereals and yogurt, and allowing infant meals to be reimbursed when the infants are breastfed by their mothers. Finally, we also divided the fruits and vegetables into two separate components for the lunch and supper meals. All of these changes were made with the purpose of creating healthier meals for participants in CACFP. On this slide, you can see some examples of healthy meals that would be served in CACFP. These are coming from posters that are available for you, and these can be downloaded from the website that's linked on the link in the bottom of the slide. On this slide, we have images of breakfast, which includes a grain, fruit, and milk component. And then for lunch and supper, you see that we require a milk, fruit, grain, and vegetable component. And at snack time, you would be expected to serve two components of your choosing out of the 5 different components that's there. And so these are meals and snacks for different age groups. And at different age groups, there are different portion sizes. And this helps make sure that your participants are receiving enough nutrients for each meal or snack that you serve. For a detailed list of all requirements for each age group by meal or snack, we do have our meal pattern charts. We have a different chart for the infant, child, and adult age groups. In each of these charts, you can see the component requirements for each meal or snack and the portion size requirements of each meal or snack by age group. We don't have time to go over all of the details for each component today, but our ODE, CNP, CACFP training page includes the meal pattern videos that will go over the meal pattern in depth. We also have these charts available for you to download from our CACFP meal pattern webpage. One resource that everyone who runs a CACFP operation needs to be familiar with is the food buying guide. Those of you who have been operating CACFP for more than 10 years probably remember when this information came in a large red binder, or large yellow binder actually, but everything is now electronic, and the food buying guide is now available online at the website link listed at the bottom of this page. The food buying guide is a resource that helps you figure out how to credit portions. While sometimes it's easy to figure out how much to portion individual items, do you know how much lean meat is in 2 pounds of chicken legs that you just purchased? How about the 10 pounds of pork tenderloins that you're serving for lunch? What if you wanted to create a recipe for meatballs? How would you know how much ground beef you would need to purchase to make sure that each participant receives their full minimum portion size? So that's the goal of the food buying guide, which is to help you figure out all of these questions. They have multiple resources, including some new ones that they added this year to their website, and this website is run by USDA. You can even use the website as a guest, but signing up for a login is easy, and having a login provides you with access to more tools since you can save recipes and food item information. For today's lesson, though, the food buying guide is important because this is your main source of information if you ever have a question about how and whether a food credits for CACFP. All right, so now that you know some of the resources that are out there, we can get into some of the updates to CACFP that have been put in place since January 2019. I will go over the group of 6 memos that make up our food crediting updates, and then I'm going to go over some additional meal pattern updates that came out this past October, and then just a few menu documentation reminders at the very end. So this series of 6 crediting memos that you see on the screen will make up the bulk of our training today. And together they provide guidance on multiple foods that were previously not creditable, and now are considered to be creditable products in all child nutrition programs. You can see the list of all 6 memos here and the link to them. ODECNP sent out those 6 memos in May of 2019, with the exception of CACFP 15-2019, which was an update to CACFP 9-2019. What happened was that USDA updated the memo on coconut, hominy, corn masa, and corn flour, and they provided the new memo in, I believe, September of this past year. What I am going to do today is I'm going to go over each of these memos and provide information on crediting highlights for each of them. Let's start off with Memo 08-2019. This is the one titled Crediting Shelf-Stable, Dried and Semi-Dried Meat, Poultry, and Seafood Products. This memo states that shelf-stable, dried, and semi-dried meats, poultry, and seafood can now be creditable as part of the meat components in the child nutrition programs. This includes basic items such as snack sticks that are made from beef and chicken, beef jerkies, and even seafood jerkies. And while I mentioned the food buying guide earlier, since there isn't an industry standard for jerkies and snack sticks, there isn't a product description for them in the food buying guide. So what does that mean? It means that instead, if you want to use beef jerkies or meat sticks as part of a creditable meal, you would need to have either a child nutrition label or a product formulation statement. On the slide, there's a sample child nutrition label. It's not for beef jerky, but it's for something that has meat in it. And child nutrition labels are also known as CN labels if you're not familiar with them. CN labels are usually only available from vendors that work with school districts, and they're fairly rare to find in grocery stores. The alternative to CN labels is a product formulation statement, also known as a PFS. A valid PFS needs to have a few different information on there, and it also needs to include a meat ingredient that has a similar description to the food item in the food buying guide when you're using dried meats. Also, the creditable amount cannot exceed the finished weight of the product. This means that even though you may need 1.5 pounds of beef to create 1 pound of beef jerky, you can't credit for more than that 1 pound of beef jerky that you get at the end. Let's take a look at a sample dried meat PFS. Remember that all PFSs require that the letter be on a manufacturer's letterhead, which you can see here, a list of ingredients, the ingredient weight per serving, the weight of creditable ingredients, the crediting amount per serving, and the signature of the manufacturer's representative, verifying that the information is correct in order to be complete. This is true for all PFSs, not just the ones for dried meats. And on this sample for beef sticks, It includes all of these required components for a completed PFS. Because it is a dried meat product, it also needs to include an ingredient description that matches with the food item from the food buying guide, and it has the creditable amount listed, which does not exceed the finished weight of the product. In this case, even though the product weighs 1.25 ounces, there is only 1 ounce of creditable lean meat per serving. And this is because the dried beef has additional ingredients added to increase the final weight. Remember, in order for any beef jerky or other dried meats to be creditable, you will need to have either a CN label or more likely a product formulation statement that looks similar to this one on the screen in order for it to be creditable for the CACFP. Moving on to our next memo, we have crediting popcorn in the child nutrition programs. This is one item that many CACFP sponsors have been asking for in the past. And we know that popcorn can be a very popular food, and USDA heard your requests. In Memo 10/2019, it made popped popcorn into a creditable grain, and not only a creditable grain, it is now creditable as a whole grain. This makes sense since popcorn kernels include the entire grain with bran, germ, and endosperm included. It is also a good source of fiber. Before you celebrate too early though, take a look at this food item description on the screen. This was downloaded from the food buying guide, and you can see next to serving size per meal contributions that it takes 3 cups of popped popcorn to provide 1 ounce equivalent of grains. If you are familiar with serving sizes, you may know that the minimum portion size for children ages 1 to 5 is half an ounce equivalent of grains for all meals and snacks. And for children ages 6 to 18, it is 1 ounce equivalent of grains. And for adults, it is 2 ounce equivalent at all meals and 1 ounce equivalent for snacks. This would mean that even for a 1-year-old, you would need to serve 1.5 cups of popcorn in order to meet their minimum portion size requirement. To serve an adult participant popcorn at lunch and to have a credit, you will need 6 cups of popcorn. That would be a movie theater size container of popcorn just for that minimum portion size. So keep in mind that while popcorn is now creditable, the minimum portion served may not be realistic for your program or certain participants in your program. In addition to portion size issues, think about your younger and older participants. Popcorn may pose a choking hazard for your younger children, as well as older adults who may have problem with chewing and swallowing. If you do serve popcorn, it may be tempting to add a lot of butter, salt, or even caramel as a treat for your participants. USDA does not restrict toppings to popcorn, but know that popcorn treats that are commonly considered desserts would not be creditable for CACFP. In all cases, it is best practice to limit unhealthy toppings for your popcorn. Popcorn that is in combination foods, for example, trail mixes or processed popcorn-like products, will require a product formulation statement in order to be creditable. And remember to always read the ingredient label. There are a lot of popcorn-shaped products out there that looks like popcorn, but instead is just a mix of cornmeal, rice flour, and oil. These would not be considered creditable popcorn. Okay, so now we are going to move on to surimi. This is Memo 11/2019, and this memo allows surimi, which is also known as imitation crab, imitation fish, or sometimes just imitation seafood, to be creditable as a meat. Often you will find surimi in seafood salads or sushi-style rolls. They come in a lot of different shapes and textures, although the most popular version are the red and white sticks, which you can see on this slide. Surimi is a combination food, meaning that it includes multiple ingredients, some which credit for CACFP and some which do not. Because of that, crediting surimi will require a higher volume. Here is the food item description for surimi from the Food Buying Guide. Under the serving size per meal contribution, you can see that it takes 3 ounces of surimi to credit for 1 ounce equivalent of meat. There is a chart underneath that shows how surimi credits, and this is taken directly from the memo. Again, 3 ounces of surimi credits for 1 ounce equivalent of meat. It takes 4.4 ounces of surimi to credit for 1.5 ounce equivalent of meat. And finally, 6 ounces of surimi to get 2.0 ounce equivalent of meat. If you are wondering why 4.4 ounces is the portion size instead of 4.5 ounces for the 1.5 ounce equivalent portion size, it is because of rounding actually with the 3 ounce and 6 ounce portion sizes. If you feel strongly that your surimi actually credits for more than stated in the Food Buying Guide, you can request a product formulation statement from the manufacturer. Without a PFS, however, it defaults to the baseline that is set by the Food Buying Guide. This baseline is reflected in the table seen on the slide and in the previous slide as well. If you have purchased surimi recently or are interested in buying surimi, know that it can be a high-cost item. While it is cheaper than some of the seafood that's out there, the cost is still often significantly higher than other meat or meat alternate products. This is because it is a highly processed food and because the portions required will result in high volumes being purchased. Staying in the realm of meat and meat alternates, we have tempeh. In Memo 12/2019, tempeh was allowed as a creditable meat alternate. If you're not familiar with tempeh, it is traditionally made of fermented soybean, but now can be made out of fermented flaxseed, beans, barleys, and oats. Tempeh is very versatile and can be used as a meat alternate in sandwiches, salads, wraps, and stir fries. On the screen is an image of a packaged tempeh you might find in a grocery store. They are usually sold in small blocks of 8 to 12 ounces. To credit tempeh made from soybeans and other legumes,
you would credit it 1-to-1 by weight.
This means that 1 ounce of tempeh is equal to 1 ounce equivalent of meat alternate. On the slide, you have the food item description for tempeh from the Food Buying Guide, and it shows the serving size per meal contribution. Note that this crediting only applies to tempeh made from soybeans and other legumes, and includes ingredients such as water, tempeh culture, vinegar, seasonings, and herbs. If it has any other ingredients other than those items, then it would be considered a combination food item. If you have tempeh made from other ingredients, we're going to take a look at how you credit them. Tempeh made from brown rice, sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, flax seeds, and any other ingredients or have multiple ingredients may credit for different components depending on the ingredients in the product. In order to credit these items for any components, remember that the creditable ingredient must have a minimum creditable quantity. This is the case for all combination food items, and that is it has to have at least 1/8 cup or 1/4 ounce equivalent. For example, if your tempeh had brown rice, but the amount of brown rice per serving is less than 1/8 cup, then it won't be creditable towards the grain component. For tempeh made with multiple ingredients like the example on the bottom of the slide, a CN label or a product formulation statement must be on file in order for the item to be creditable. Without a CN label or a PFS, there is no way to tell exactly what quantities for each ingredient are in these products. And now for something a little different, we have Memo 13/2019, which is on crediting pasta products made of vegetable flour. With this memo, pastas that are made of 100% vegetable flour can credit by volume. This means half a cup of 100% vegetable flour pasta credits as half a cup of vegetable. If you have pastas that are a mix of vegetable flours and other non-vegetable ingredients, the pasta is a combination food and will need to have a PFS. For pastas that are made of 100% legume flours, such as red lentil pastas, these can credit as either a meat alternate or a vegetable. A half cup of 100% legume flour pasta will credit as a 2-ounce equivalent of meat alternate. So a while back, zucchini and other squashes cut into noodle shapes were very popular, and these zoodles, like the one shown on this slide, can continue to credit as a vegetable based on the volume that is served. Note that grain-based pastas that only contain a small amount of vegetable powder for color, such as spinach pastas or sun-dried tomato pastas, do not credit as a vegetable but can credit as a grain. And finally, we have our last memo out of the 6 memos that we previously looked at. Memo 15, 2019 replaces Memo 09, 2019. They both have the same title, crediting coconut, hominy, corn masa, and corn flour. Memo 15, 2019 was released by ODE-CNP in September and provided additional guidance on creditable hominy and grits. It also allowed dried coconuts to be creditable, whereas in CACFP 09 2019, it had previously been considered non-creditable. So I'm going to go over the final rule with all of these different ingredients. And since this memo had so many items, we will go through the crediting for each item one by one. So let's start with coconuts. With this memo, coconuts now credit as part of the fruit component. Fresh and frozen coconuts credit based on the volume served. So a 1/4 cup of fresh coconut will equal a 1/4 cup of fruit. So this is just like most fruits out there. If you have dried coconuts, like all dried fruits, they credit for twice the volume served. This means that an 1/8 cup of dried coconuts will equal a 1/4 cup of fruit. If you have 100% coconut juice, and remember, it does have to be 100% juice, just like all the juices you serve in CACFP. This can credit as the fruit component as well, but will count towards your once per day juice limit for CACFP. 100% juice credits for the volume that is served, so a 1/4 cup of juice will equal a 1/4 cup of fruit. Sometimes coconut juice is also marketed as coconut water. It means the same thing, and both are creditable as long as they are 100% coconut juice or 100% coconut water. There are some popular coconut products out there that will not credit for the fruit component though. This includes coconut flour and coconut oil, and both of these items are not creditable for any component. So we're going to take a quick look at these 2 coconut waters and their ingredient list. Think to yourself, which of these 2 would be creditable? The one on the left has 100% coconut water as the only ingredient, while the one on the right has filtered water as the first ingredient, a sweetener blend as the second ingredient, and coconut water concentrate as the third ingredient, along with a whole mess of other ingredients after that. Take a moment to think about it. There's no poll for you to answer, but just think about your answer. What do you all think? If you said the one on the left is creditable, you are correct. You will always want to make sure that your items are 100% coconut juice or coconut water. And on the shelf at the grocery store, you might see both of these items shelved together. But if you check the ingredient list of the item on the right, you will notice that the item is not 100% juice. In fact, it's probably not even 10% juice. So if in doubt, check the label, and if you're still not sure after checking the label, the safest route is to not use that particular item. Next, let's go to hominy. Hominy is a corn kernel that is nixtamalized. This means that the product was soaked in a lime or lye solution, which releases some of the nutrients that are in the corn kernel. The canned hominy is often made of whole corn, and they are often puffed up and twice the size of a normal corn kernel. Canned and cooked whole hominy will credit as a vegetable by volume. A quarter cup of canned or cooked whole hominy will credit as a quarter cup of vegetable. Dry hominy or dry hominy grits is when the nixtamalized corn kernel is dried and then ground up. Dry hominy grits will credit as a whole grain since it includes the full grain kernel. A half cup of cooked hominy grits or 1 ounce of dry hominy will credit as 1 ounce equivalent of whole grains. Grocery stores and food vendors often have both hominy grits and enriched grits, or even products labeled simply as just grits. These are all different products. While hominy grits can credit as a whole grain, if it says enriched grits, these will only credit as an enriched grain since it is a processed product that does not include the whole kernel, but includes added nutrients. Products labeled only as grits, stone ground corn, or degermed corn are not creditable since they use processed corn that does not include the whole kernel and do not have any added nutrients to make them enriched. So as a reminder, dry hominy grits, whole grain, enriched grits are enriched grains, and then if it's just labeled grits, it's not creditable. Corn masa and masa harina is very similar to hominy. Like hominy, they are made of nixtamalized corn, meaning it is soaked in an alkaline solution, and the products are now considered whole grains. This also makes our crediting match more closely with the WIC crediting. Sometimes masa harina is labeled as ground corn with a trace of lime or ground corn treated with lime. This is the definition of nixtamalized and makes the product a whole grain. To credit corn masa or masa harina, a half cup cooked is equal to 1 ounce dry, which is equal to 1 ounce equivalent. This crediting is the same as dry hominy grits. To round out the corn family and also this memo, we have corn flour and cornmeal. Unlike hominy or corn masa, corn flour and cornmeal is not typically nixtamalized, although you may find products that use nixtamalized corn flour. Like the grits example, corn flour and cornmeal have multiple varieties, and some are whole grains, some are enriched, and some are not creditable at all. It is always important to read the ingredient list. Items listed with the word whole in front of the first ingredient will be whole grain rich, so very self-evident. For example, whole corn flour or whole corn meal. If you see nixtamalized corn flour, that also is a whole grain rich item. Anytime you see the words nixtamalized with a corn product, it will be a whole grain rich item. Items listed with the word enriched or with added vitamins like folic acid, riboflavin, niacin, and thiamine will be considered creditable, but not whole grain rich. Finally, items that does not have the words whole or enriched, but instead only lists itself as corn flour, cornmeal, or stone ground corn flour will not be creditable since it is not enriched or a whole grain rich item. Just like with the grits, if it says whole or if it says hominy, you're okay crediting it as a whole grain rich item. If it only says enriched, it's okay as a creditable item. If it doesn't say either whole or enriched in front of corn flour or cornmeal, then it will not credit as a grain for CACFP. And when in doubt, check your ingredient list and take a second look at it and just make sure that your items will be at the very minimum creditable. So now we're going to get to our second thought exercise. With all of this information swimming around in your head about all of these newly creditable items in CACFP, would you be able to serve your CACFP participant this meal on the screen? This would be a lunch with milk, beef jerky, coconut juice, popcorn, and zoodles. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that they are all served in the correct minimum portion sizes. So think about it for a few seconds. Would you consider this a fully creditable meal? And would you be able to serve it for CACFP. And you actually could, because the beef jerky would credit as the meat, the coconut juice would credit for the fruit, as long as you didn't serve another juice at another meal or snack that day. The popcorn would credit as a grain, and the zoodle would credit as a vegetable. There is a few things to keep in mind though. I bet you knew that caveat was coming up. Before you rush out to create a new menu, remember that your beef jerky must have a product formulation statement or a CN label in order to be creditable. And you must serve enough to credit for the minimum portion size for your age group, and that can get costly. Second, you will probably need to buy a popcorn maker since you need at least 1.5 cups to 6 cups of popcorn for each participant, depending on the age group that you are serving. And finally, if you're serving coconut juice, make sure that it is measured, and especially if it comes in one of those whole coconuts. The minimum portion size is 1/8 cup for children 1 to 2 years old, and a 1/4 cup for children ages 3 to 18, and 1/2 cup for adults who are served. So things to keep in mind when you are developing your menus. And all of this is to say, just because you could doesn't mean you should. USDA had considered some of these food items that we discussed to be non-creditable for many years for a variety of reasons. Some of it is related to nutritional quality and some of it is related to practicality. While USDA is allowing these foods to be served as part of a creditable meal now, it is still important to keep nutrition quality in mind when you are creating your menus. Is your average participant able to consume the full minimum portions? Are the food added to the menus increasing the amount of salt and fat to your meal? And even though this is something we don't calculate for CACFP, it's still important when it comes to the health of your participants. Besides nutritional quality though, you will also want to keep in mind food costs. A few of the items listed on those menus can be pricier than other CACFP meal pattern options, and these include stuff like beef jerky and surimi. As always, make sure you are keeping all required supporting documentation to prove that you are serving creditable items in their minimum serving sizes. Due to the changes in crediting, ODE-CMP has updated our non-creditable food lists to remove many of these items, including popcorn and beef jerky, from our list. You can also find that on our CACFP meal pattern and menu planning page. So now it's time to test your knowledge and see how much you have learned from this training. I'm going to read the question first to give you time to think about your answer, and then I will launch the poll and go to webinar. Taking a look at this ingredient list on the screen, would the following pasta be creditable for the vegetable component? And the ingredients include semolina, which is a wheat, durum wheat flour, zucchini puree, and with a whole bunch of other ingredients in there, spinach puree, niacin, iron, and so on and so forth. I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll right now. So it looks like the majority have it, and the answer is no. Why is it not creditable for the vegetable component? The reason why it's not creditable is because the first ingredient is a grain ingredient. This means that it is not a 100% vegetable flour product. Instead, what it is a combination food item because you have both wheat and vegetables in there. And this item would require a product formulation statement in order to be creditable for CACFP. And this is why it's always important to read the labels before you purchase a product, because if you were just to look at the front packaging of this product, you would think that this is a veggie pasta, right? So remember, read the ingredients, make sure that it is 100% vegetable flour in order to credit that item as a vegetable component. So let's try another question. It is movie day at your center. How much popcorn would you need to make for 10 participants if they needed 1 ounce servings for a snack? Would it be 10 cups, 20 cups, 30 cups, or 40 cups? So I'm going to go ahead and launch our very last poll. Okay, and again, the majority of you got it. Great job, everybody. And the answer is 30 cups. So I'm going to close this poll and we're going to go back to our slides. And the reason why it is 30 cups is because we need to calculate out how much cups we need per participant, and 1 ounce equivalent of grains is equal to 3 cups of popcorn. So if you have 10 participants, that equals 10 ounce equivalents. So 10 times 3 equals 30 cups of popcorn. So 30 cups is a lot of popcorn. If you have an industrial kitchen, maybe that's not too hard to meet. Of course, you're likely going to have more than 10 participants. But if you have a small kitchen, this might be more popcorn than you can reasonably make in a short amount of time. Think about feasibility. Think about how much your participants can eat before you update your menus to include these new items. So those are those 6 memos that were released last year that added new items to the CACFP and to all child nutrition programs. Now we're going to take a look at 2 memos that were released in October 2019. The first is a follow-up memo with question and answers on rules that related to flexibilities for milk, whole grains, and sodium requirements. The second one is an update on smoothies in the child nutrition program. So for the first memo, it mostly relates to the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program. And the one piece of information in that memo that relates to CACFP is the milk flexibility. Previously, only non-fat flavored milk was allowed for children 6 years old and older and adult participants. Now with this flexibility, it also allows 1% flavored milk to be creditable for participants 6 years old and older. The flexibility has been introduced since July 1st, 2019. And just as a note, if you're trying to find 1% flavored milk in the grocery stores, it's pretty hard to find. And so most of the flavored milk you're going to find in grocery stores will be either non-fat or whole milk. And you wouldn't be allowed to serve the whole milk flavored milks because those are not creditable for the younger age groups because flavored milks are not allowed for participants under 6 years of age. The smoothie memo is an update on previous smoothie memos that we had. The main change in this memo is that commercially prepared smoothies can now be creditable if there is a product formulation statement or child nutrition label on file. So you might be sensing a theme here. Anytime things aren't entirely clear about how you credit, a product formulation statement or a CN label is likely going to be needed. Previously, only homemade smoothies were allowed. Now commercial smoothie mixes are also allowed as long as a PFS or a CN label is on file. This memo also reiterated some of our older rules. This included the rule that the only ingredient that can credit as a meat alternate in smoothies is yogurt, and this can include both soy and cow's milk yogurt. Like before, 4 ounces of yogurt is equal to 1 ounce equivalent of meat alternate. And even though I know nut butters can be a popular choice to add to smoothies, it won't credit as a meat alternate since no other meats or meat alternates will credit for the meat or meat alternate component. Remember that any vegetables and fruits blended into a smoothie will credit as a juice and is subject to the once per day limit for all juices. And yes, this means kale. If you're blending in kale into your smoothies, you can credit it as kale juice. And if you are one of those people that enjoys blending all sorts of things into your smoothies, know that dry beans and peas will only credit towards the vegetable component when served in a smoothie, and it will not credit for that meat alternate component. So see the rule above about yogurts being the only item that can credit as a meat alternate. And finally, no nutritional supplements are allowed in smoothies for CACFP. And last fall, we did send out an email and memo on the ounce equivalent portion size rule update. On September 25th, 2019, USDA decided to delay the implementation of the ounce equivalent portion sizing requirements for the grains component until October 1st, 2021. ODE-CMP already trained all sponsors on ounce equivalents last April for April 2019, and the information is still valid. However, you don't need to worry about implementing the ounce equivalent serving sizes until October 1st, 2021. If you have already started implementing ounce equivalents at your site, you are welcome to continue, and USDA has started to release some resources. This is one in both English and Spanish that details out ounce equivalent serving sizes for common grain products. This is very similar to our easy-to-use grains and breads chart. And just as a reminder, this is how you should be documenting your menus. We did send out a memo last year in January 16th, 2019, that listed out the required CACFP menu documentation. These are just some highlights from there. Menus have to include actual food items served. This helps to verify that the foods served are creditable. Whole grain rich items must be labeled. This helps you to check that you are serving at least one whole grain rich item each day. Cereals must include the name of the cereal, so it could be matched to the nutrition facts label showing that your items are low in sugar. And if you are buying the store brand equivalent, make sure that you are listing the store brand name on there and not the popular name. Similarly, yogurts have to include the flavor of the yogurt, so it can be matched with your nutrition facts label as well. And this is because the same brand of yogurt can have different sugar levels for different flavors. And your milk type must be listed for each age group, since different age groups require different types of milk. And if you use ODE's template, we already add that for you at the bottom. And finally, infant meals, meaning meals for children younger than 1 year of age, must be documented on the correct infant menu record form. And if you want to see all of the memos sent out by ODE, you can go to our ODE CMP CACFP memo page. All memos are listed on the page and are in reverse chronological order. Charts, handouts, and tools related to the CACFP meal pattern can be found on our CACFP meal pattern and menu planning page. That is also accessible from our main page on our public website. You can also have a direct link here on the screen, which is also a clickable link on your PDF. And finally, we have our food buying guide. That is the basis for all of our crediting for all child nutrition programs. And the links are available on this slide in your PDF as well. So we went over quite a few things today. We went over the learning objectives, in which you learned how new food items are creditable for CACFP. Oh, and you also took a look at the CACFP meal pattern overview. We also looked at crediting updates, and we also looked at additional meal pattern updates as well. Finally, I'm going to open up the questions and chat boxes. All right, we have a few questions coming in. Somebody asked if it's possible to take photos of nutrition labels for documentation, and you can. So you can have photos, but you do want to make sure that you have receipts to back up that you purchased those items. All right, so we have a question. During CACFP, when we serve K to 5th graders, are there any exceptions to the chocolate milk? And this is referring to the flavored milk restrictions that only allow flavored milks to be served to children 6 years old and older. And in this case, it sounds like the question is, what if you have 5-year-olds who are in kindergarten who are mixed in with all of the other older kids that are allowed to get chocolate milk, but they themselves are not allowed because they're under 6. And so there isn't any flexibility on that in CACFP. I understand for NSLP, there might be some flexibility there, but in CACFP, it has to be done by age. And so if you know that you have quite a few 5-year-olds in your program and they're mixed in with the older kids, my suggestion is to just not serve the flavored milk. I know the kids really enjoy flavored milk, but it can cause more problems if you're having to keep track of who is allowed to have flavored milk and who is not. All right, thank you everybody for being on this webinar with us. If you do have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to your assigned child nutrition specialist. We all welcome your questions, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
This institution is an equal opportunity provider.